Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another Wolfram language design review. This one looks fairly light, but you never know. Okay, riffling with an arbitrary head.
Right. So right now Riffle requires a list-like thing in the first argument and can be either a singleton or a list in the second argument. Um, and
Okay.
there's right. And it's one thing that, there's the Eric special case, right? That if the two lists happen to have the same length rather than doing the sort of normal, you
Oh
know,
gosh.
in between you add the last item, which,
What does that mean? What happens if I just do riffle? That seems crazy to me. What happens if I do this?
well,
It does the right thing.
right. And also if you did 1, 2, 3, 4, you would get the same thing. Right. But there is the special case that if they happen to have the same length, uh, then you add the last element, right? You quote unquote fully merge the two lists instead of doing normal riffle, which,
Well, I don't
it's,
even know that was a thing. Is that documented?
yeah, of course it's documented. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, Eric apparently convinced you that this was a good thing for version 6, and this
Which
was
Eric?
Weisstein.
Okay.
Uh,
God, I've never used that feature. I've never used riffle on anything other than honestly, I didn't know that riffle interspersed things this way. It's nice that it does.
right.
Okay, what's the question?
Right. So there's this old suggestion that basically that we discussed long ago, and I really mean like long ago, probably 8 years ago, without reaching a decision. And I just, to be perfectly honest, I just want to kill it. But the suggestion is we should allow any head in the first argument. Um, which, on the one hand, sure, we could do that. I don't know.
I don't think it's important. I don't
Yeah.
think it's important. I think that it's, these things where we allow a different head in some function, it causes as much trouble as it helps, in my view, most
Yes,
of the time.
exactly. That right. I'm like, yes, we can do that, but then we'll need to make all these other decisions. And since users haven't been clamoring for this, I just want to officially kill it. So
Hmm. What
if
happens? Is there a way of riffling at level two?
um I don't think so. I think it's you know only at level 1, and you can sort of specify, start, end, and skip, but you can't do it at any deeper level.
Okay.
So
I
if
think we should just kill this suggestion. I don't think it's
all right,
important.
perfect. That is what I wanted to hear.
Right.
Okay. Right. So this is something that, came from apparently a tabular meeting that I happened to be on PTO that day. And you said we should
Okay.
discuss this in LCC. And so here we are discussing it. That,
Okay.
and right. So, right, we have our args with, which we've never documented because we haven't been able to implement the syntax coloring. And you said, oh, this is related to autoparens for scoping functions. And John and I are like, we don't see the connection. So maybe you're just confused, but here it is to be discussed.
Well, I do think that multi-argument with is really useful, and I think we should figure out a way to what is our what's the blocker in terms of the syntax coloring?
Right.
Uh, so I implemented the easy parts of the syntax coloring and presented it to you, and you responded saying, "No, we really need the whole thing, or we can't do it at all." Um,
That's not green, right? There.
Right. And it wants to be, right? So if you look at the picture, right,
I'm sorry. When I say I implemented the easy parts, I actually implemented this. Um, but it hasn't gone into a production build because what I didn't implement is is a proper notion of, like, if you formulate y in terms of x
Yes.
in that second argument there, that so the problem is the front end syntax coloring code is, it works with boxes, and it's a very difficult kind of bit of thing to extend in arbitrary ways. And this is a brand new paradigm, which is that we've never done before, which is scopes that change every time you hit a comma. So everything we've done before, there's one scope globally defined throughout the function, and it's just a matter of finding where the definitions are. But this is very, very different, because you have to define multiple scopes all the way through. And it sounds in principle like it should be easy, but just with the code the way it is, it's difficult to.
All right, look, I think it's important.
So, John, if I can just get a clarification, John.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought all you had done was remove the too many arguments coloring. You've done something beyond that?
It needs something beyond that. It needs to greenify things.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry. I will have to. I am probably not going. Do you remember what the bug number was that we were discussing about this?
Well, now that I know how to search for it,
yeah.
So with doesn't have its syntax coloring, but if I were to do this, if I were to say foo,
414128.
Okay, see, that should syntax color. That should come out red.
Right. You can, if you look at the screenshot of the ideal, right, that is an ideal, but that is.
I see.
Oh, sorry. Let's see. Right. Okay. I'm sorry. No, I was wrong. I was wrong. It's only greening the first thing.
So I just want to say, I think this is one of these things where, the syntax coloring front end team just needs to, this is a bug basically, or, a limitation, and we just need to make it work, because I think this is an important thing to have. I'd certainly use it all the time.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Okay, fine. So let's just add this. Let's make sure it's on the global project list. Let's make sure it comes up in our user assistance and front end backlog stuff. And, it's something you need to assign somebody to when we have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. I mean, the part of the problem is it is so complex that there are only two people who can do it.
Who's the second? You noticed I estimated that the list was John.
Jason Harris could do it.
Okay. Right, and he's working full bore on tabular right now, right? So that's not going to happen for 14.2. We could maybe.
I don't even think somebody like Ian could do this. Not because he's incapable.
Okay, well, fine.
But
this is a good thing
because,
for Jason. It's a good thing to use his skills for. So let's do it. Okay. I think it's important to have things where we can make it happen, get it done. As you know.
Yeah.
So, fine. I mean, I think that's the path for this. Is there anything that we need to talk about from a design point of view, or is the design known at this point? It's just known.
I think the design is known. I mean, basically, I prototyped, that thing there that shows the correct syntax coloring, except my prototype, I goofed on the final X3. The final X3 should have been green, but I think that all of those colors in that bitmap are, they're straightforward and understood.
Okay, fine. So this is for Jason as soon as he's done with the tabular stuff.
So without using a list is not a thing, though.
I'm sorry?
I'm just wondering about without using lists, like just with x equals 3 without putting it in a list, if that's the thing that.
We looked into this and we rejected it because it caused. There was a scoping issue, like when you combined it with block. Basically, when you had constructed widths that somehow that did something undesirable, and I'd have to go dig through the notes to look up.
It is a reasonable question to raise, and we should look at those. We should just look at that and make sure we know what we're talking about there. even given modern syntax coloring and, you know, those kinds of things. All right, let's move on. But Itai, if you can, or somebody can try and surface, or Felipe or somebody can try and surface the previous, you know, discussion about that, because I know we did talk about that. Make
Yeah,
sense?
I remember that we discussed it and no details either. So
I remember
yeah.
that we discussed it and we concluded it was not a good idea. But I
Right.
don't
And
remember.
what we didn't only discuss it, we prototyped it and we discovered that that it broke certain code patterns. I just can't give you the exact example off the
Yeah.
top.
So let's find out again, and we'll either kill it or figure out a way to, because we have modernized a bunch of ideas about, you know, how we syntax color things and so on. It might help. All right.
All right. So this is a continuation of something we started discussing last time, which, because a couple of meetings were canceled, you may not remember when was the last time we had a
No,
meeting.
no, I remember talking about this.
Yes.
Okay. The question is, should absolute and scaled be things where, you know, they are a way of indicating for things that are normally scaled, you know, it just is a no-op. For things that are not, and things that are normally absolute, it's scaled, and vice versa. Personally, I think
Well,
this would be quite nice if it
in
gets supported
fact, what's
everywhere.
implemented today isn't, you know, you can't, I don't think that you can pass absolute thickness a scaled and have it work the way it's implemented today.
I understand. But I think there is an argument that the most convenient thing would be to have either outside in or inside out type setting for this. That is, you either use absolute thickness, in which case the default is that it's absolute inside, or you use thickness, in which case the default is that it's scale. But if you're not sure, or you want to flip it around, or we wouldn't have to have an absolute thickness if we had absolute and scaled. And I mean, to me, that would be the most convenient thing, is that the functions default in some way, but if you don't want the default, you want to flip it around, you explicitly use scaled or absolute. And if you don't remember, you type in scaled and absolute, and you know, it will guarantee to do the thing you want it to do. Personally, I kind of like this idea of having scaled and absolute, but they have to be supported pretty broadly.
Right. So so the first question is, I mean, is it true for these directives, and is it sort of true for basically all the relevant directives that, you know, everything is interpreted as a scale thing or as an absolute thing by default, or are there mixed cases? And maybe the answer to that doesn't matter, but I think it's worth understanding that
Well,
first.
the other question is whether we accept units in some of these things. Do we?
No, we don't. At least no cases that I'm aware of.
There's Brett here. Can Brett comment on this?
Brett, if you're talking, you're muted.
No, I was in the process of unmuting. Within graphics, you know, it doesn't support units, and you know, to the extent that, you know, the viz functions support units, it's things related to user coordinates. You know, the data that you're putting in, you know, is the
I
values you're
understand.
plotting.
It's not with respect to the plotting. I mean, it's always complicated to know what you mean, because points are points, and you know, who knows what a point is, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, personally, I favor the idea of trying to get to, we won't get there all the way immediately, allowing scaled and absolute in all coordinate specifications. I mean, you know, is it obvious what they mean? For example, scaled, is it obvious what it's scaled with respect to? Because I think we also have some confusion there. Some things are scaled with respect to width, some things are scaled, you know, et cetera.
Yeah.
Personally, I think somebody should do a bit of a study of where we accept scaled, what scaled means, and I think we should try to get scaled and absolute to just work. An absolute means, presumably, well, okay, there's really three things. There's absolute is points, for example. Is physical coordinates on the screen, more or less. Scaled is relative to the size of the whole, image, the image size, basically. And then X alone is user coordinates. Is that right, guys?
Wow, that's certainly never not something that we've ever done with like thickness.
No, it's
or,
not clear what thickness would mean
yeah.
because the user coordinates in 3D or something, there's three of them. So what will we do?
Yeah.
So thickness, the default is that it's a scaled thing.
Correct.
But I think, for things that are, I mean, this is where we have to kind of inventory them. And somebody needs to do some actual design work and see which functions, place something in the, okay.
I mean, we've done a bit of an inventory right there. And I think, aside from, in terms of sizes, I think that's the list, except the dashing is not very robustly implemented.
I
But
don't think that's the list. I think there are plenty of others. Let's take a look. Brett,
I
can you
mean, there's
speak-
probably
can you speak?
arrowheads that
Yeah, there's
is
definitely
always
arrowheads.
scaled.
That's a good one. There's vertex sizes and graphs, right? That's a good example.
Well, okay, so I wasn't counting something like vertex sizes because I mean this is something it's done quite low level at the raw
cap form.
directive level.
Cap form.
That's just a
Rounding
fixed set of
radius.
values.
Yeah, cap form doesn't take a number.
Oh, okay, right. So
It's like 3 strings that it takes.
yeah, okay. Rounding radius.
Rounding radius is used well, yeah, well, we do support rounding radius in rectangle now. But rounding radius has some. Oh, I'm sorry. Rounding radius actually does support and is documented to support scaled. I had not remembered that.
And it probably also supports offset, which is
Yes, it does.
used similarly to
rounding radius
absolute.
supports user coordinates, offset, which is points, and scaled.
Yeah, I've never entirely understood offset. Do we want to talk about what offset is?
I think
mean,
that
there's definitely a relationship between offset and absolutes.
yes. And there's also the question of whether one has arithmetic, like you say, scale 0.2 plus absolute whatever. See, I think the issue is, okay, offset. Okay, there are things that have 1 degree of freedom, one size, like thickness, for example. And there are things which have a 2-dimensional position, like where does a point go?
Mm-hmm.
And I think offset, absolute is the 1D, analog of offset. Now, I don't know what
I would
offset,
agree.
Yeah, I don't know what offset does.
Which is to say it's a scalar, not a coordinate.
Which?
Absolute is a scalar.
Yes, I agree.
Offset is a coordinate.
Well, offset is some kind of vector. In some sense.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So now that raises the question, if you have a number line plot, for example, which is a 1-dimensional plot, what does offset do? If it even works.
I mean, it's not a meaningful question, at least not in current design of number line plot.
Yeah, I mean,
So
number
list
line
plot, for example, doesn't accept. I mean, list plot is taking user coordinates in.
Correct. And it may generate something with scaled or offset. I mean,
I think we need a better inventory of where these things are used. Okay, it's not the most urgent thing in the world, but let's get a full inventory of all these functions. Where, I mean, also in 3D, what happens with
right. I mean, offset has no meaning in 3D.
Okay, but thickness does.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other primitives there. I just don't think we have enough information. I think we need a nice table of where these things are used. We need to know. I mean, my initial take is that scaled and absolute and offset are, I mean, offset is a little weird, but, I think all of these are, we should just figure out all the places where they can be used. I mean, for example, if I want to kick a circle that was at user coordinate 0, 0 up by some number of points of absolute points. I mean, my question is really, is the right thing to do? Could we imagine a world in which we say disk of, 0 plus, it doesn't mean don't need the 0, absolute of 3? Is that crazy?
I think that's crazy.
Okay.
That
I mean, I'm not sure what the use of these things is, and it'd be interesting to know.
Well, and in this case, it doesn't provide anything that offset doesn't currently provide.
I agree. Okay, let me make another point. So a case that I've run into this a lot is in graphs, where there's a question of what the heck does thickness actually mean? Because there's a bunch of transformations going on. If I do this, if I say, oh, drat. Let's say I say.
By the
Yeah.
way,
I will say that, I find, I guess this is a slightly different thing, but I don't think, but I think it's related to what you're saying. I find it a little bit frustrating that, with graph, like, right, we have a few named layouts, but if you want to sort of create a custom layout, you need to there's no way to say, take this layout and sort of tweak it with this additional information. You have to create all of the coordinates yourself, at which point it's like, that's too much trouble. Right? Because I
I
don't
don't know how to get, yes, that's a good point, but I don't know how to make tweakings. I mean, I agree that what we do have is fixing some coordinates and letting the others be found automatically. I believe that's now working fully. We should check that, but I don't know if that's properly documented. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Can we make sure somebody checks that? That you specify the vertex coordinates, an incomplete set of vertex coordinates, and then the rest is left to be done with, spring electrical embedding, let's say. Am I making sense? Okay, so this is, I would have no idea. I mean, let's see, let's go to 0.2 or something here. I really don't even know what that thickness corresponds to. I don't even know why the line caps are wrong here. There's a bunch of weirdness here.
That behavior surprises me greatly.
What behavior?
The fact that you're getting lines anywhere close to that thick.
Well, I mean, if I specify a big enough thickness, I'm going to get thick lines.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking absolute. Never mind.
No, I mean, presumably, but again, we should report this a bug. Those are line caps that aren't right? If I said cap form of what should I say, do you think?
Well, in this case, you probably want whatever the round one is. Is it just round? String of round, yeah.
Yeah.
Magnificent. Charles should change this to that. Don't see why this wouldn't be the default. Anyway, look, I think these issues about thickness are much more extreme in the case of in this case than they are in. So if I say absolute thickness here and change that up to 30 or something. Yeah, I mean, that is
looks
what it is.
reasonable.
Yeah.
By the way, the disk made me think of another place where a scalar measurement pops out that hadn't occurred to me, which is the radius of the disk, and we are not supporting absolute in that case, and that I think strengthens your case for putting together an inventory.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the weird places you can use offset.
Is that right? But I mean, that's crazy. And that's why we should consider having
Right,
absolute.
I mean, you
instead,
have the
because-
docs on offset open right there.
Yeah, I was going, but I was going
Open
to.
the details.
Okay. I'm,
Last statement.
That's bizarre and crazy.
Okay, yeah, I right. I will, well, okay, so this somewhat changes the comment I'm about to make, but I was going to point out that according to the main usage, offset is a 2-argument thing, and yet 50% of the basic examples use a 1-argument offset.
Oh gosh. Okay, we got a mess here. This is a quintessential LCC problem. Let's
right,
go
well-
inventory it and try and solve it.
Yeah, we'll make an inventory. Don't expect the inventory to be finished anytime soon, but I will
Yeah.
assign that to an appropriate
What
person.
is image scale doing here?
Image scaled is like scaled, but with a different default width.
Right, with the image size width rather than the.
Plot range size width.
Right.
We need to get these things cleaned up. I mean, offset is weird. It should be turned into absolute, I think. I mean, what I worry about with absolute, well, with any of these things that are relative, like the scaled things, it's a scalar quantity, but is it relative to the width, the height, or what? See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that is, context dependent and probably appropriately so.
Somewhat. I mean, but as we change the aspect ratio, I mean, like if we change this, okay, and we also change the aspect ratio here.
Right, I mean, scaled of 0.1 is very different for aspect ratio 2 than it is for 1/2.
By the way, you can interactively change the aspect ratio by holding down Shift when you resize.
Okay, so now in this case, I see it gets skinnier. The individual thicknesses get smaller as I change the aspect ratio.
Yeah.
Because this thing is
Scaled by
probably
default is
depending
on the
on
width of the thing.
right, but that's which arguably should be a second argument of scaled, what it's relative to.
I was just thinking about that. I mean, it's not a crazy idea. I mean, scaled already takes a second argument, but
What is
the
it?
use cases may be sufficiently distinguishable.
Oh, it's because it's doing the offset.
Right, it can do a scaled version of offset from a point.
Um,
And then you can do things like,
Wow.
offset of scaled of blah, 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 and like have it shift over a scaled amount and an offset amount.
Right. And if you read that main usage, right, that I most commonly use scaled in things where it's definitely not giving a position, right? I use scaled in things like image size and
yeah, same here.
and so maybe we need to rethink this usage message.
And also the usage message, I usually use it as scaled of 0.1 or something, which is not even mentioned in the usage message.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got a muddle puddle here. This is a typical, LCC.
I love that
shooting
phrase.
muddle puddle. Yeah. Okay. I
So
mean,
you see, Stephen, this wasn't as straightforward as you thought.
no, actually this one, well, I don't know. Okay, so yes, I mean, let's inventory these cases. The documentation seems to be inadequate. My feeling is where this is going to end up is scaled is going to want to take a second argument saying what it's scaled with respect to, both scaled and absolute are going to want to be able to take scalar and vector quantities. The only thing that probably we may or may not want in arithmetic with these things. I kind of think it would be nice to have arithmetic with these things with up values that turn them into, for example, offsets or something. Those are my statements here.
And you know,
I don't remember if the arithmetic commutes.
I don't think it does.
Yeah, it probably doesn't, in which case.
Well, okay, so then that's off the table probably.
But you know, and another kind of related confusion about the, you know, scaling with relative to what is, you know, it's not an uncommon thing that, you know, somebody reports to me, well, I did image size scaled and I expected it to be half the width of the window, but it's not. And it's because it's wrapped in another thing, which is kind of, you know, that's, you're now scaling against that.
Right. Well, that's a good reason to have some kind of second argument to scaled where you could just say window, and then that's what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like these are all things that current value, I mean, they're basically, you know, doing arithmetic relative to a current value. Is that a fair statement?
Maybe, yeah. I think that all of the containers that can bound to scaled, you know, window has window size, and I think all the other containers have image size options.
Okay. All right. Look, there's clearly an inventory to be made here. Yeah.
The weirdest one is graphics, because you might be, as Brett just noted, you know, scaling against the plot range rather than scaling against the whole image.
Which is what image scaled is doing, which we might want to get rid of, which we could get rid of if we had a second argument to scaled.
Yeah.
Right, and then you could say, you know, whether you wanted the width or the height or the diagonal or the max dimension or...
Right, which would be quite useful because particularly when you have many plots together, you know, you want to be able to determine that. You know, if you have many plots and they are, you know, for example, in a perfect world, if you had a graphics row, well, I don't think we can necessarily even tell. I mean, if they say, if they're all image size, automatic, comma, blah, 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 then they're all going to match in height and not in width. And that's probably what you want the scale to be, you know, locked to the height, not the width in that case.
And the downside to all this is you create more fixed point problems.
I understand.
Like jittery grids, you mean?
Yes. I mean, you know, you know, something, you have something which is scaled relative, you know, like in graphics, where you have something that is scaled relative to, say, the image size of the surrounding graphics container, but the graphics container is itself sized to, you know, hold its contents. And so you can end up bouncing.
Right.
And I mean, there are cases that could bounce forever. There are cases that could bounce unacceptably long performance-wise. So the front end basically allows one bounce and that's it.
Yes. All right, let's go into the anti-aliasing stuff.
Okay, so this is going to be one of those issues where I need to tell you a story or we will both end up very frustrated. So,
okay.
So, there was this whole discussion about anti-aliasing, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but basically the claim was anti-aliasing should be an option to graphics because you need to wrap style around graphics, and graphics doesn't normally work with style. And that's a very confused statement. Since anti-aliasing is kind of hard to see, I'm just going to illustrate this with, you know, font color and font size. So, you know, you don't need to wrap graphics in style, right? You can use just base style to turn on anti-aliasing or font color, font size, whatever it is you want. Okay, that's simple and easy. Now, any existing styles can surrounding graphics can potentially affect it, but graphics, by the reason people think you can't use style to say font size is because, well, graphics has opinions about what font you're using and the font size and whatnot. And if we were to change it to not have opinions, that would probably break a whole lot of stuff. So you can have graphics inherit from its environment by resetting the default base style. So you see in my two disks next to each other, it's basically the same, only in one case I've added default base style goes to empty list, and now the font color and the font size from the environment leak into the graphics, and you get the nice A. And this is, this happens all over the place. Like Button has opinions about what font to use, right? It tries to fit in with the system font, but you can say base style goes to empty list, and now it inherits the font from its environment.
Default base style goes to empty list.
No, in the case of Button, the font.
Well, in the case of Button, it's both for reasons. Button is a weird outlier. For most boxes, you would only need to do the default base style.
Yes, but as it turns out, for Button, at least for a simple button, for this particular button, I'm not going to claim about all buttons. For this particular button, you only need to change base style. Right. Now, then going back, so if you scroll down a little bit, something that's not documented well or possibly at all is that you can sort of use any style option as a directive. So you can see here, I locally changed the font size and font color by creating a list where I set font size to 72 and font color to cyan, and then my superset symbol became blue and larger. And then once I left that nested list, the global.
I had no idea that worked.
Yes. This has worked since version 6.
Okay, I didn't know that was new in 6. Although it's
I mean, I can't say for certain that it doesn't go back farther, but this is, this was implemented in the graphic system when we introduced it in version
But if we
6.
said style of text, blah, comma, font size, arrow 72, that would work fine as well.
Yes, they are precisely equivalent in the front end.
Okay.
Right. Right. And so, do we want to have, do we locally, is it sufficiently common that you would want to locally set
How do you set anti-aliasing right now?
Well, you can either just set anti-aliasing goes to true false using the list as a directive. If you want to set it locally, I believe your current option right now is to use the option as a directive. Obviously,
but you
can do it in style.
Or you can do it
in style of line, comma, anti-aliasing.
So in principle, I could say graphics of style of, everything.
Will that work?
No.
Why
No,
not?
I think if you want to set it globally, I think you need to set it.
Yeah. Sorry, inside the style, yes. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
Can the style surround the whole list of directives? I wasn't sure if that works or not. But
can it surround a list? Yes. Okay. Because the list, it's just hierarchical boxes, and a list is actually a box. In fact, we call it a list box internally.
Okay. In graphic.
I was gonna say, and Stephen will have to tell us if those are actually, rendering as anti-aliased goes to false.
I can't tell.
Yeah.
How would I tell?
One approach, do / rasterize after that graphic and blow it up. And set it at like 1600 magnification or something, or big enough.
So is that anti-aliased or not?
Is there any shades of gray?
That is not anti-aliased. You can see it's just black
I
and
see,
white.
I see, I see. So if I say anti-alias to true, then it's got gray.
Yeah.
Great. This works. So the
Right.
question is, should anti-aliasing be a top-level option in graphics?
Well, I don't think
question.
that's the question. I think the question is, should we have a directive to do it? Because right now you can set it, you can wrap the whole thing in style, or you can set it in base style.
I mean, part of what was asked for, which is not unreasonable, is the notion that you might want to anti-alias some things, but not other things in a single graphic.
Right, which you can do with the style option. So
Yes.
long as anti-aliasing documents that, I think we're in good shape. But I think it is going to be more likely that you have a whole graphic and you say, hey, I want to switch off anti-aliasing for this whole graphic.
Right, and you can do that by wrapping the whole list in style, or you can
I know, but
or
that
by
seems yucky.
setting it in base style.
Okay, I think both of those are yucky. What I'm asking for is that this option, which exists as a style option, is also an option to graphics as a whole.
So one thing that I'll bring up is that at least in the past, say V6 through V12-ish at least, certain things were anti-aliased by default and certain things weren't.
Okay.
And so it usually wasn't a good idea to just turn them all on or turn them all off. An example of this is like vertical lines and horizontal lines were usually not anti-aliased. Especially like frames and axes and stuff. What the behavior is in the modern high DPI state, I'm not quite as clear on.
Well, okay. So you're saying really there's an anti-aliasing or arrow automatic that is the most common setting. My point is, if you want to switch on or off anti-aliasing, you kind of have to, you were going to want to do it for the whole graphic. That's the most likely thing. The concept that you anti-alias one object in the graphic, I think, is a much rarer case. Usually I have a graphic, it's one particular thing, it looks terrible for some reason or another. Okay, let me give an example, actually, and this is an example which is going to actually make this point more clear. Okay, here we go. How do I set, okay, so look at this. How do I set anti-aliasing on or off for this? I think I'm toast unless there's an anti-aliasing option for array plot.
There's not. Right, I mean, this is what pixel constrained used to do.
It does do, but pixel constraint does this, but that does a different thing.
It effectively died in the high DPI transition because there was no longer a cross-platform, well-defined
it looks beautiful,
thing.
But it does a different thing. See, it's beautiful. See how perfect that is?
So, I mean, just from the point of view of setting the anti-aliasing option and however it's going to behave here, array plot does take a base style option.
Okay, so let's try it. I mean, I didn't even know that, but let's try it. Okay,
well,
so we've got that.
Any viz function that generates a graphics object takes the base style option.
I just never use it. Okay, so now I say anti-aliasing goes to false, let's say.
Yeah.
Hard to tell. Let's try anti-aliasing goes to true. Well, I don't see any difference. Should there be?
I'm not actually sure if there should be in this case.
Me neither.
I think this may be subject instead to the what did we call it? It's something we reviewed in LCC last year. It was Ian had come up with image smoothing, but it got renamed to something else. I can't remember what it was
yes.
renamed to.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, listen, my bottom line here is I argue that there should simply be a top-level option anti-aliasing for graphics-related functions. Maybe this is a thing where 2024 is the wrong year to introduce this because anti-aliasing is just going to be globally on, it's never going to cause a problem, and the DPIs are so high that
Well,
it doesn't
I think it's
matter.
actually going to be globally off because we're moving into the high DPI world, and we just
No, but that's on.
Oh, that's on? Okay.
I mean, on is. I mean, I think even in high DPI, it's going to want to anti-alias.
Yeah.
It's just going to be even finer anti-aliasing.
Okay, bottom line here, and then we need to wrap up. Is anti-aliasing, should it be a top-level option or not? I think it should be. I don't think it's that important, but I think it should be.
By the way, I found the thing that affects this example. I'm throwing it in chat. It's
Pretty obscure.
It's a bit obscure, yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, maybe it does on. Okay.
I don't even know. This is okay.
It does on my Windows box. Maybe it's.
Okay, I got several comments. If in fact anti-aliasing is not an option for array plot, but can be inserted through base style, we should have some kind of raft or other way of telling people that, because they're never going to figure it out otherwise. I would also argue that I don't see why it isn't supported. I mean, you know, then the question is, should font family be supported as a top-level option in array plot?
And that's why why I don't think, I mean, we've gone for how many years without it being a top level option to graphics, and sort of where do you draw the line, right? I mean, if you look at the set of option, the set of styles that are set by graphics, you're right. You do current value of style definitions of graphics. It sets dozens, if not hundreds, of things. So why are we picking on anti-aliasing when there are dozens or other possible candidates?
And in terms of feeding top level things in, I think that's the function of base style. That's really what we designed it for.
I mean, okay, fair enough. Okay, here's the problem that I have. The problem that I have is if I start saying, font size arrow 10, it's just going to go red. Okay? If I could get something there that at least says use base style, I think I'm done.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, and that's a general question.
I mean, that's it's not a thing we can do now, but it's similar to some other suggestions that are in the queue from you. So, it's not so different, for example, to the chart style versus plot style thing.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
fine.
Steve,
That's the solution.
Scroll down to the bottom. I think we're basically settled everything, but right. So I suggested that right. So it sounds like we don't want a directive. We'll just live with style. And I guess we've decided we're not going to document the fact that you can use style options as directives.
Yes.
Okay. So then my last recommendation is that we should treat default base style for graphics 3D as we do for a bunch of other heads, which means we document the associated styles that base styles append to, which is implicitly the default value of default base style. We add default base style to options of graphic, so it doesn't color as an unknown option, but we don't list it in the options table on the ref page. That's sort of what we've done on button and panel and pane and
Sorry, why would we not list default base style?
So the issue is that default base style is, you can think of it as, these are our styles. These are the vendor styles.
I see, but there is a base style which the user can set. Correct?
Exactly.
and that is
The base style is designed for user usage. The default base style, if users use it, then things may go wrong because that's not what we intend.
Yeah, fine. I think that's good. Then don't document it.
Right. So there is a rough page for default base style that basically says it's a low level option, blah, blah, blah. But on the individual pages that take default base style, we only list base style and not default base style.
I think that's a fine thing. If you do
Okay.
options, do you see it? I guess you do.
You do, you're right. So right now in graphics, you don't, but my suggestion is we should make it work like button where you see it, because it's there.
I think it's silly not to show it.
I didn't realize it was hidden from graphics, and I consider that just an oversight.
Okay.
Fine. So rafting it, so to speak, with, to inform people that you should set font size or something, or anti-aliasing and base style seems like a fine solution.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you later.